Hi there, welcome to another edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling. This episode is going to be about a band that I have done episodes on before, at least a couple. But this time around, I'm doing a compact disc episode. I don't do a lot of CD episodes. You'll probably see a few more of these in the future. I'm doing it on one of my all-time favorite bands, and a band that was the subject of one of my first TVC episodes, and one of the reasons I've always loved vinyl, because they have such cool artwork. I'm talking about Journey, if you haven't figured that out. And the occasion of a compact disc episode, I wanted to do an episode that featured their music, but mostly I'm really, really excited that they're finally, after 16 years of being eligible, at least on the ballot for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, for what it's worth, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, does it mean a lot? No, but they are starting to induct some bands that are generally considered more commercial, I guess. They've shied away from mainstream. If it's mainstream, it must be bad, must be corporate rock, and therefore have no substance. So let's put it in a virtually unknown songwriter. Go figure. So I have no idea if they're going to make the cut this year. And of course, if they do, the speculation will no doubt run wild. Does this mean that they're going to reunite with Steve Perry, at least for the ceremony? Will they perform with him? Who will be there from Journey? The big burning question, will Randy Jackson be nominated as a member of Journey? Just kidding about that. Seriously though, if Arnell doesn't get inducted and Randy does, I'm going to be a little bit upset about that. So I thought I'd go over my Journey CDs. Just in recent weeks have made an addition to my Journey CD collection, which, considering I've had them all for years, is quite a feat. So we'll get into that on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. So the first three Journey albums were before Steve Perry joined, as I've talked about in our vinyl episode and also the cassette episode. And they still remain, I don't think any of them have gone gold. Great musicianship, not pop songs in the least, not catchy choruses for the most part, but great playing. And great stuff to explore. If you just you put it on the background, if you're working on something, and you find yourself drawn into these melodies, and if you're a guitar player, of course, Neil Schon, on fire as always, but very young Neil Schon, just blistering guitar playing. So I'll start off with the first Journey album from 1975 on Columbia. Now, the CD I've got here is a bit of a hybrid CD. You can see from the side of that there. This is not the first CD edition of the debut Journey album that I've had. This is actually a Canadian edition that Sony started to put out, these special editions you see there in that blue. In the late 90s, there were select albums that had sort of been out of print in Canada anyway. They did a few like that, and this is the only one I picked up. They did REO Speedwagon's REO album, Cheap Trick, Lap of Luxury, and a few others. They didn't do whole catalogs like this. They just did a few. But there wasn't anything inside of it for credits, so I kept the booklet out of my U.S. edition, out of the U.S. Columbia edition. So there you go. That would have been what the front and back cover of the record would look like. This actually has the lyrics to all the songs inside of it. And just a tiny little bit of credits. So that's the booklet. The CD itself, though, in the Canadian edition is kind of cool. It's a picture disc. It's got the front, the album cover graphics a little bit on there. If that's going to show up in the light that well. And inside of it, you can see, look for more great special editions. Now, these are all various albums, but just showed you that there was a series put out at one time by Sony Music of Canada. The next Journey album, Look Into the Future, 1976. This is the US CD edition. This is one of the first CDs I bought once I started buying CDs in the early 90s. And you'll have to take my word for it, because unfortunately I don't have them anymore. Wish I'd have kept them. I'd originally bought this in a long box. So, like most CBS CDs, that's what this looked like on the side. The back cover. And very much not at all in the booklet itself. No lyrics, not much for credits. And the CD itself just looks like a usual Columbia US CBS CD. Next is Next. 1977, the third Journey album. This is again a US edition. And for some reason, Some CBS CDs, just a few of them, had this little smaller print on them. I don't know what the reasoning was behind it. I don't know if there is an edition of Next that has the regular. For those of you that know that the font is called Impact, you can print up CD covers that look exactly like these old CBS ones. But that one's just more of a plain font. I've got another CD that looks like this, which is Joe Perry Project. I've got the Rock and Rolls Again. I have a feeling that they did it on that because it's such a long title. So why they did it with this, I'm not sure. These must have been produced around the same time. That's the back cover. That's what the CD looks like. Interesting that the CD itself, I don't know if you can see that in the small print, it doesn't say CBS Records, it says Sony Music Entertainment. So I think this is a slightly later issue of Next. That's what the back of it looks like. And this does have the lyrics and credits inside of it. Fourth Journey album, of course, the debut Steve Perry album, and I'm sure to some fans the debut Journey album, and if you just look inside the greatest hits, it does look like the oldest album available. But here it is, Infinity. Now, unlike the record, I don't think, or maybe I'm thinking of the cassette, but maybe it's the cassette that doesn't always have Infinity written on it. This artwork is super cool. This was the first time that Stanley Mouse started doing their artwork, and this began that period of the majestic-looking Journey album covers that I just love the artwork on. Typical looking CD. This is one of the ones that has a copyright on it of 1978 and 1986. A lot of the CBS CDs I have from Journey, from Aerosmith, from Kansas, they have 2 copyright dates on them. So in 86 they must have put a bunch of them out. No surprises on the CD itself. So hard to show what a CD looks like. It's shiny. Gatefold. And this, like inside the record, has the dedication to Leonard Skinner after the plane crash, and the lyrics are printed in the same script as they are inside the record. So, unlike a lot of early CDs, this actually has folds out. It's got a little bit of guts to the packaging. Of course, Evolution is next. 1979, nice price sticker on it that a lot of the CBS cassettes and CDs had. I don't know if the Budget Line Records did or not. I wasn't buying records back then, but another cool bit of artwork. Side of it looks just the same as you'd expect. Back cover, you know, nothing different looking about the CD, yet I feel compelled to show it to you. No lyrics inside this one, but it does have all the credits that were inside the original album. They actually put a little bit of time writing their liner notes, a little bit of thank yous. Like, it looked like there was a little bit more of a personal touch. And a CD that I got just recently that I didn't think existed on CD. I don't mind being wrong in a case like this. But Journey's first 3 albums, once Infinity and Evolution came out, started to build. They weren't successful right away. People forget that. They think that Journey were always this million-selling band. They weren't always, but they were gaining some momentum. They were starting to get a lot more radio play with Steve Perry, with Love and Touch and Squeeze and Wheel in the Sky. Those songs were sort of catching on at radio, so they were doing better as a touring act. So what does a record company do? They try to make some money off what came before. So they compiled songs from the first 3 Journey albums. This is not like Kiss the Originals or Rush Archives, where they just simply took the first 3 albums and put them into one big package and put them back out. This was a compilation, 14-song compilation from songs from the first 3 Journey albums. They put it out in late 1979, so after Evolution came out. It's called In the Beginning. And it's one of those CDs that when, again, like I said, in 1986, when CBS started reissuing all the CDs, they didn't reissue in the beginning. They only reissued it on cassette, so it became just one of those oddities in the Journey catalog, and I figured I would never ever find it on CD, and as a matter of fact there's something I'm going to get to that I was using as an In the Beginning CD, which I still think fits the bill. But Discogs, I just in 2016 discovered Discogs.com. Fantastic resource for music sellers and buyers. It's like if eBay was only for music, but what I also love about Discogs is that it shows you different versions of albums from different years different countries, different labels, and a lot of the time there's pictures. Now, my little disclaimer, if you're going to upload something to Discogs, I don't think they should let you upload anything unless you have a picture. Not a stock picture either. It's got to be a picture of the actual item. So I had a want list started on Discogs, and all of a sudden I got a notification for this thing that came out internationally. This is In the Beginning by Journey on CD, and I honestly didn't think this existed. So as you can see right there, that's what the European versions of CBS Sony albums looked like. Songs on the back cover. This is really, really heavy for me because it's been years since I just really tracked down one of these sort of holy grail items, if you like, that I didn't think existed at all. And the booklet actually has, it's like a catalog, nice price, mid-price compact disc bestsellers. So it's got a bunch of different albums that are available, but the very back cover, it's got the little write-up that appears in the back of the record of In the Beginning, talking about where the songs came from and who appeared on them. And again, even though it was the early stuff, they're using the newer, cooler artwork on here. Probably in the hopes of getting people to buy it. Now, it must not have sold much more, I'm guessing, than the first 3 albums, because it never was issued on CD North America, which you would think that it would have been, considering Journey are an American band. They were very big, and I don't even think it was issued in Japan, which, I mean, if you can usually always find a Japanese issue of something if it exists, so this was a very, very nice surprise. And so Journey were one of the bands that I really concentrated on filling up my CD collection with and replacing my cassettes. So by the time that the inevitable remasters came out in 1996, after Trial by Fire came out, their reunion album, I already had most of them, but I do have one that I got just to see what the remastered ones look like. And this is the 1996 Sony reissue of Departure. Originally came out in 1980, of course. So it looks different on the side. It's more customized to match the graphics on the front cover. Again, love the artwork. So this is the whole scarab beetle thing. And again, I know I've pointed this out in the vinyl episode too. That looks very much like their greatest hits album. It's basically the same picture. They just kind of flipped it and put a different color scheme on it for whatever reason. That's what the CD looks like. So there's the pictures that are on the back cover, the band photos. And as you might imagine, there's considerably more in the credits than there would have been originally. However, no lyrics. Just this long Departure with all the credits that came in with it. So that's the remastered version of Departure. And honestly, other than being louder, Journey albums were generally quite well produced anyway. So it's just cool to have them. It was cool. It's always cool when the remasters happen, so that the older albums, in case they go to print, they're readily available. The other oddity in the Journey catalog for years and years was the one that I didn't even know existed until I found it, because discographies, most of them didn't list it. It was Dream After Dream, which came out in 1980 originally in Japan, soundtrack to a Japanese animated film, which I can never remember the name of. And this is a Japanese reissue CD. And I haven't had that too awful long. But everything about this album is just so unique and unknown in the Journey world that I think I showed this episode at the end of my cassette episode, but I'll show it in its proper context now. And once again, this album wasn't available in the States. I don't think it was ever available in Canada except for U.S. imports until 1983, or although you could order it through the Journey Force fan club, I think, back in the day. So that's the front and back cover, Dream After Dream. A little bit of credits, and also this folds up here. This album was the last Journey album, the last Journey studio album that Greg Raleigh appears on before he left. This is, of course, the Japanese translation of all the lyrics. There's a little bit of English in here too, and it also has other albums that are available. So I was very glad to get that one. That's one, too, that evaded all of the remastering treatments. I always thought it was only ever available on record and cassette. So after that, actually the first Journey album I ever had, I had it on cassette, is the live album Captured. This has a nice price sticker on it. This is an original CBS issue of it. Maybe not an exact original, but close to it. Or they kept using the same template. Now this one is when they stopped making the CDs in Japan for U.S. release. It's now made in the USA. They went out of their way to show that these were American made. I think that started in towards the mid-'80s. I'm really intrigued about the early days of CDs and finding out early issues and when things actually came out. That's what the CD itself looks like. No surprises there. The Captured record had a lot of cool pictures in it. It had a great big poster. The CD, of course, reproduces the gatefold. The poster is not with it, though. And all of the credits and a list of where all the cities where all the songs were taken from inside of Captured. And, of course, we're now reaching the point where Greg Raleigh has left, Jonathan Cain has joined, and this is the golden period for Journey, as most people know. So one of the earliest Journey CDs I bought, not the very first, but was Escape. And probably, other than Greatest Hits, was the most. I mean, this is the biggest selling Journey studio album, the one you've seen the most. You know, this album graphic is iconic. And this is a US CD. Quite an old one, too, I think, by the time I picked it up. Because if you see on the side there, it doesn't say Columbia, it says CBS. And that doesn't always happen, and I don't really know why that is. See, this does not have the Now Made in the USA thing on it. So, and down here, that's the Columbia logo, the I logo, but it says CBS. So, this is definitely manufactured in Japan. Although the CD itself has Columbia on it. You see that right there. Which tells me that, I think, if I'm reading that correctly, they manufactured the CD booklets, back covers and all of that, before they manufactured the actual CDs, or they made more of those than they did the original CDs. I'm not sure which. It looks like they had older booklets they put newer CDs with. Absolute wasted space here. There's the front and back cover, and from the inside of the graphic, the band members running with a little bit of credits and the lyrics. And most of these, as you've seen so far, with a couple of exceptions, are American issues. It was just easier to find US issues of them. This is the only UK version of a Journey album that I have. This is Frontiers. This is my favorite Journey studio album. Always was, always will be. Found this used. I didn't send away for it as an import. I was just trying to build my collection, and might as well use this as anything. Immediately you see on the back, it's different font, different color scheme, different catalog number. Familiar back cover. This is what this CD looks like. Not dissimilar to the US discs. Back cover, same as in the record, and but the lyrics are a little bit different. The way that the lyrics are set up. Cheap Trick, Standing on the Edge. I have a UK version. I think it's UK. It's European. It looks a lot like this booklet here. A CD that I bought used, a little beaten up. I should probably eventually replace it, but you'll see why. Is Raised on Radio, 1986. This is probably the first. I think this would have been the first Journey studio album to be issued on CD at the time that the album actually came out. I'm not 100% sure about that. Back cover's got a little wear and tear on it. I don't know if you can see it there. It's a little water damage there. That's what it was like when I bought it. So like I said, probably wouldn't hurt to replace it. Let's see what this booklet looks like. It's got the same as on the back cover. Wouldn't be a lot of surprises there. These, in my opinion, stupid shots of the band as a trio. No rhythm section. All the lyrics and the credits, they're very faded. So this is was probably bought upon release and then somebody got rid of it. So I should probably replace the Raised on Radio CD. Chance to get another remaster, who knows. Of course, the big one, the one everybody has, is Journey's Greatest Hits. It's been issued several times. Mine is a Canadian, this is the first Canadian CD. This is a Columbia House issue that I got in the early 90s, but this probably hasn't changed since it was first released. So CBS, but it's Canadian, so it doesn't use the impact font. It has just a very plain font on it. And as CBS Canada CDs do, has this ugly box look. It doesn't use the exact graphics that would have been on the back of the CD booklet or indeed the back of the original record. But I kind of have a nostalgia for these CDs now because you don't see them that much, even on big albums like this. There's the CD itself. And of course, see, that would have been what would appear on the US edition originally of the back cover of Greatest Hits. This is one of those perennial albums that just continues to sell. I think it's probably, if you look, it's probably still in the Billboard Top 200 or was or what will be again. So all they list are the albums that the songs came from. And they list all the lyrics, which is handy. So, of course, Journey go on hiatus at this point, or I guess they already were on hiatus by the time Greatest Hits came out. So the Greatest Hits comes out. What's the other thing they can do? Well, they can put out a box set. So they did in 1992. And it's a very cool box set. I'm about to show you this, but something I found that was kind of neat. This is a promotional CD. The box set was called Time 3, Time Cubed. And this is a test of Time Cubed. Limited edition sampler. This probably would have been sent to record stores and radio stations. I found it in a pawn shop. Probably was never meant for resale, but I bought it anyway. This has got 10 songs on it, all showing songs from the Journey box set. So that's what Sony CDs looked like if they weren't customized in the early 90s. This sort of font here, whether you bought it in the States or in Canada. There's the back cover, lists the songs. So right away you see there's Natural Thing, Liberty, Good Times, Into Your Arms. I think Into Your Arms is on here. Yeah, so there's songs that didn't appear anywhere else that came out on this. And again, this is what the Sony CDs looked like at the time that weren't customized. Nothing on that back. So that's definitely something that it was a limited time and then that was it. So let's take a look at the box set itself. It was cool to have, but I learned some things from it too. So this is Time Cube. This is the Journey box set that came out in 1992, late 1992. That's what it looks like on the side and on the back. Now, this is pretty comprehensive. It didn't have exactly everything you would have wanted it to have, but I did learn some things from this. For one thing, I learned what the story was with Dream After Dream, which I never knew before. I'll show you the discs first. They all just show a different scene from the front cover, again with the Scarab Beetle theme. So that's disc 1, disc 2, and disc 3. Lots of unreleased stuff on here, some live tracks, alternate versions, early writing demos. So here's the booklet. That would look cool on a record. There's so much cool stuff in here. There are single covers, the concert posters, reprinted. We got any Y&T fans on here? I know we do. And any mention of Y&T is cool with me. Somewhere here, I'll show you. Yeah, here we go. Journey Tour poster from the Infinity Era. Yesterday and Today. There you go. So anyway, a good write-up on the band, the history of the band. Yeah, Dream After Dream. This is where they talk about what that was all about. In the back, there's a pretty comprehensive listing of the albums, the chart positions, the songs on them, and write-ups on each song. These are really cool. There's just little things that you wouldn't have read that I've never read anywhere else. For instance, talking about the song "Where Were You," which is one of their really sort of harder rocking numbers. And Neil Sean said it was inspired by having AC/DC open for them. And they said, you can't help being influenced by a band like that. So we wanted to do something that was really high energy like that. Also, I love the fact that it talks about Greg Raleigh picking up Jonathan Cain as his replacement because Jonathan Cain was in the Babies, opening for them in 1980, and he said that's the guy, and he said he could also play guitar. I knew Neil would want someone who could also play guitar. This is a keyboard player we're talking about. So I just thought a lot of cool anecdotes in there. Of course, they put the music on. It's just like what a wealth of great music. If you wanted to start in with the Journey catalog beyond Greatest Hits or Greatest Hits 2, I'd hit that box set if you could find a copy of it. So 1996, the unexpected happens to me. I didn't see it coming, but it was certainly welcome, even though it was short-lived. Steve Perry Neil Schon, Jonathan Cain, Ross Valory, and Steve Smith, the classic 80s Journey lineup reunited for Trial by Fire. Now, I like this album. It's pretty mellow, except for a few songs on it, but just the fact that Journey were back. And again, you know, the graphics, they didn't cheap out on the graphics for sure. I'm not really sure I understand it all, but by this time, this CD is a Canadian edition. It would have looked about the same in the States. The album did well, but it was sort of its lifespan was sort of cut short because Steve Perry didn't tour, etc., etc. Long story about that. The blue tint to this album. Inside the CD was a listing for not only the Journey studio albums, greatest hits, but Steve Perry Street Talk. I'm sure he had a lot to do with the fact that they wanted that featured on there. And you also notice the first three in the beginning, Dream After Dream, not even mentioned. But there they are. That was a Journey it's hard to believe 20 years ago now, but that was what the reunited Journey lineup looked like. So inside, fairly big fold out. I don't know if any one of these could have been like a single cover, and maybe that was the intention. As a matter of fact, I think this one right here with the cat head on it was the single cover for When You Love a Woman, which is a semi-hit single from this album. There's all the lyrics and credits. So it happened. If it never happens again, it happened once. They reunited with Perry. So not much going on after that, so they had to do something to fill in time. When I say they, I mean the record label. So in 1998, this came out, Greatest Hits Live. Similar artwork to Trial by Fire. They're kind of keeping that theme going. This collects songs from Escape, Frontiers, tours. So this is all post-captured, but there's nothing from the Raised on Radio era. So it has the classic Journey lineup, a little spiral notebook looking thing here. The disc itself is personalized, customized. It's got like the crowd shot on there. Some personalized Journey license plates from fans over the years, all between 81 and 83. It just shows you how big they were. Most of them from Texas, actually. So a little bit of write up on the songs, how they had to bake the tapes. You've heard people talk about baking the old tapes so they can preserve the music one last time, make sure it doesn't get destroyed. More pictures on the other side of it. And, you know, there's nothing different on here, song-wise, but some good renditions of some classic songs. It's worth picking up. So by this time, Journey moved on and got Steve O'Jerry on lead vocals and Dean Castronovo on drums. And the first new album to come of that lineup came out in 2001, at least in North America. I think it came out a little sooner in Japan with another album cover. This is Arrival, 2001. This is a Canadian edition. Foreign editions have a couple other songs on here, I think. That's what the disc itself looks like, and a photo of the then current lineup of Journey. Album didn't really do all that well. I think they did all right on tour, but people just they want Steve Perry. I liked a lot of the songs on this album. There was some great stuff on here. Signs of Life, Higher Place, good stuff. The ballad All the Way was a semi-adult contemporary hit. That was the last new album they did for Sony. But almost immediately after that, it seemed to me like they really wanted to keep this lineup going and keep it working. They put this EP out called Red 13. Now, I always get this mixed up with Sammy Hagar's 1013 because he's got the whole red thing going on. But this came out in 2002. They put it out themselves. There are two different artworks for this one. I don't know which one I've got, if it's the rarer of the two. Kind of an experimental album. It's not really typical Journey sounding, although it's not that different. An instrumental intro and then 4 actual songs. That's what the disc itself looks like. There's a photo of the band. I don't know, I never counted. 13 might have been the order of release, I'm not sure. So it's got all the lyrics and credits. And this was the last New Journey album until 2005. And 2005 is when they got their star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Steve Perry made an appearance, and there was all that speculation about him rejoining the group, and it never happened. So what we got was Generations. This album was initially sold with the band on tour, and it was released proper eventually. This is one that was this was put out on Sanctuary Records. It was still distributed by Sony. I like a lot of songs on here. I actually really like this album. It kind of gets slagged for some reason or another. It's an enhanced CD, so there's a sort of EPAC or making of short documentary on here. Pop it into your computer. It was kind of cutting edge at the time. I don't know if that was the first one of these I got. But, and of course all the lyrics and the credits. And very, very classic Journey artwork, I might add. I've never seen that on vinyl. It would look cool on vinyl. It's interesting to note, and there are several instances of this happening. When the new Journey would do something, it seemed like their old label would do something as well. I don't have the Essential Journey, like Sony put out all these Essential series for various acts, and not long after Arrival came out that same year, they put out the Essential Journey. And in 2005, after Generations came out, a few months later, Sony, in collaboration with Steve Perry, put this out, a live album that was originally a concert that was broadcast on MTV, when MTV had only been on the air for a very, very short time, back in 1981 in Houston, the Escape Tour. The classic Journey lineup, right down to putting the Escape album cover on the cover to this CD. Now, of course, it goes without saying, this is a classic Journey lineup, a great concert of songs. They were just on fire. It's just interesting the timing behind putting it out when they did. So there's the disc and a photo of the band. I actually didn't have this for many, many years. I found it in a $5 bin and then said, why not? So there's cool stuff inside of here. It's just interesting to note that when the band does something current, it seems like the other labels want to do something to counter that, I guess. Well, I haven't been proven wrong yet. It just seems to happen that way. Now, 2008, I mean, Journey went through a really rough patch between 2005, 2006, 2007. They had Jeff Scott's, Steve O'Jerry had to leave. It's a long story about that. Different versions of the story. They brought in Jeff Scott Soto for a very short time. I think he's a great singer. I don't think he fit Journey at all. So that didn't continue, as I was actually kind of happy about. I didn't think that was a good fit. So then 2008, of course, it was a big story for a while, and the band did very well when they put this out. This is Revelation. This was a new Journey album that was a Walmart exclusive, at least in North America. Very visible. They had it on the shelves everywhere, and this introduced Arnel Pineda to the band as the new lead vocalist, who Neil Sean found on YouTube. It's a famous Cinderella story. There's a documentary about it. And this one disc is a brand new album. There's 2 re-recorded versions of some Journey classics, so they could use these versions and license them for commercials, for TV shows, something that a lot of bands are doing, and they are capable, competent, updated versions. They're not replacing the originals, and I don't think they're meant to. But it was a smart move. It was a smart move on their part, because you get the diehard fans like me that are going to grab a new Journey album no matter what. But you get the casual fans in line that would look at the back of this CD, automatically see Don't Stop Believin', faithfully, any way you want it. Who's Crying Now? Open Arms. Oh, I'm going to buy this. And it was reasonably priced too, I might add. And it also came with a live DVD, which further introduced Arnel to the public. So the discs themselves, all 3 of them, the 2 CDs and the DVD. And of course, there is a booklet that came with it. Credits, lyrics. This album actually went platinum, which I was really, really happy to see happen. And I know a lot of that was the impulse buy and teaming with Walmart, but it worked. That time around, it worked. And to date, Journey have only done 1 more studio album. And I'd like for them to do another one. Here it is. This was also a Walmart exclusive. Didn't do as well. Eclipse. This came out 2011. This is a harder-edged album, more experimental, but still Journey. Nowadays, you can probably find this for $5 at most Walmarts, and it is worth the $5 to add it to your collection. It just didn't seem to catch on like the last one did. I've often wondered if they'd have done another disc of re-records, if it would have made a difference, but the disc itself looks very cool. And once again, Sony and Steve Perry responded to the release of a new Journey album with this. This is Greatest Hits 2, came out in 2011. And this picks up the songs that were not on the first Greatest Hits album, like Suzanne, like Stone in Love, like The Party's Over, like Walks Like a Lady, songs that were top 40 hits, and a few other like album track favorites that did not make the first Greatest Hits album. So, you know, it's worth picking up, obviously. It's just interesting. The timing is, as always, interesting when they do things like that. Like the look of the disc itself. Complete your Journey collection. It says here, complete your Journey collection. Except, guys, that's not the complete Journey collection. The first 3 albums in the beginning, Dream After Dream, they're not there. The box set isn't even mentioned on here, which is makes me wonder if it's not out of print. So, there's a big booklet inside here, picture of the group. That was probably from the Trial by Fire era, would have had to have been. Just various, you know, ticket stubs, concert posters, concert shots, photo of the first Greatest Hits there. It's a good companion to the first Greatest Hits. Also in 2011, I mentioned earlier when I had in the beginning, I didn't think I'd ever find it on CD, so I got something to kind of sit in its place. Sony's done this a few times, original album classics. I think I went over this at the end of my cassette episode. And this just simply has the first 3 Journey albums and these little reproductions of the sleeves for all 3 of them. First album, Looking to the Future Next. With the In the Beginning disc, hey, look, I'll put this in the car or something. That's fine. So that's, like I said, to this date, as of 2016, Journey haven't done a new album. I hope they do, but that's what I've got from CDs. I've got a few others here I want to show you. This is kind of a good chance for me to show the some Journey-related stuff that I've got, because I don't have it all. Certainly far from it. This is Steve Perry's first solo album, Street Talk, from '84. Of course, this was a big album. And customized graphics that he used on the disc itself. He's only done one other full-length studio album. It didn't come out until 1994 for The Love of Strange Medicine. In the midst of the time this came out, this was the grunge era, he had a minor hit with a fantastic rock song. I mean, it was a rock song called You Better Wait. So I didn't get into this album as much as I would hoped. It's pretty mellow in places, but hey, Steve Perry was back, even if it was for a brief time. And that kind of ramped up his eventual return for Trial by Fire with Journey. Neil Schon has been extremely prolific with his solo career. I don't have, I haven't followed his solo career all along. I tend to be band-centric, but when I saw them in concert last year, he was, excuse me, he was kind of the opening act for himself. And he did an all-instrumental thing called Vortex. And just for a concert souvenir, I bought this autographed CD at the merch booth. This is good to put on in the background. I can't see me listening to this much, but to tell one song from the other, it's kind of hard. I'm not an instrumental kind of guy, but I mean, he's one of my favorite guitar players, so this is a worthwhile purchase. Don't get me wrong, it's good. The other cool thing about it that further ties us into the Journey world is that Jonathan Cain appears on here, and so does Steve Smith, who's currently back in the drum chair with them. And one other thing I want to show you is kind of a Journey that came out when there was no Journey. After the Raised on Radio tour concluded in 1987, the band members, there was never, I don't think, ever an official breakup. And I don't know how else to say this without sounding punny. They literally went their separate ways. Steve Perry kind of went into hiding. Neil Schon, Jonathan Cain went into Bad English with Jonathan Cain's former Babies bandmate John Waite. The drummer in Bad English was Dean Castronovo, who of course would eventually join Journey. And another project happened, which fooled me when I heard the single on the radio. In late 1991, this album came out. The album and the group is called The Storm. 5-piece band, 3/5 Journey. Greg Raleigh on keyboards and co-lead vocals, Ross Valerie and Steve Smith. Guitar player was named Josh Ramos, and the singer was named Kevin Chalfant. Now, Kevin Chalfant has this bubbling under career in almost breaking as a member of a band. He almost replaced Dave Bickler in Survivor. Jimmy Jameson got that job. He's just been kind of underneath the surface, but this was his. This is probably his biggest moment as a member of a band. He was also in a band called 707 with Todd Howarth, who was in went on to join Fraley's Comet. But this album came out, and this basically is, I don't want to call it Poor Man's Journey, but it's very Journey-esque. Not exactly. It's a little more hard rock. It's produced by Beau Hill, who typically is more of a hard rock sound. The second song on here was the first single called I've Got a Lot to Learn About Love. Great melodic rock tune, sort of a mid-tempo song, not exactly a ballad. But when I first heard it on the radio, I thought it was a new Steve Perry song. I'd heard talk, this is pre-internet, mind you, 91. I'd heard talk of Steve Perry putting out a new album. And Kevin Chalfant sounds a good deal like Steve Perry, I think. So this song comes on, he sings the first line, and immediately I'm thinking, is this Steve Perry? And then Greg Raleigh takes the next part, which is very much in line with what they did in that period between 78 and 80, where they would share lead vocals on the occasional song. So I thought, this is Journey's back together. And they've got Greg Raleigh. But Bad English just put out a new album. It was very confusing. And then I got the album eventually. And I wish I could say the whole album was as good as that one single. It's not, but it's worth picking up. Usually, if you're going to find it, you probably find it fairly cheap. By the way, these are Hugh Syme graphics. Talked about Hugh Syme a lot. And it's just kind of a cool thing. They did another album called Eye of the Storm, but Valerie and Smith had left, so it wasn't quite as concentrated Journey as it was on the first album. Thank you for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions, and I think I speak for a lot of people out there. It would be really cool to see Journey in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.